When paramedics rush into a home for a 6-year-old who supposedly fell down the stairs, they expect to find a tragic, heartbreaking accident. But on November 13th, 2011, first responders in Calgary walked into an absolute house of horrors. What they found at the bottom of those stairs was not a clumsy child. They found a fragile 46-pound little girl who had 40 separate bruises covering her from head to toe, a little girl whose pancreas and liver were completely torn from a massive, deliberate blow to the stomach. They found a 5-week-old skull fracture that had been entirely ignored and left untreated. And most chillingly, a little girl who had been held down by her own stepmother while her tiny hand was forced over the open flame of a lighter until she screamed, kicked, and urinated in sheer terror. The people crying on that 911 audio tape were not frantic, grieving parents. They were monsters putting on a calculated performance to cover up days of torture. Welcome to Famous Cold Case. Today we are opening the vault on one of the most heartbreaking, devastating, and infuriating tragedies to ever unfold in North America. This is the story of Meika Jordan, a case where innocence was shattered behind closed doors, and where the most terrifying villains were the ones sleeping under the very same roof. I must warn you right from the beginning, the details of this investigation are extremely difficult to hear, especially for those of you with children. But before we step into the darkness of this investigation, I have a quick favor to ask. If you believe every innocent child deserves justice, it has to take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. We deeply cherish our Famous Cold Case family, and your support is our strongest weapon to make sure these victims are never forgotten. Join us because we cannot fight for them without you. Meika Jordan was born on December 11th, 2004, in the bustling city of Calgary, Canada, to her parents, Kayla and Spencer Jordan. When her life was violently cut short, she was only 6 years old. She stood just 3 feet 10 inches tall and weighed a fragile 46 pounds. But those clinical numbers do not even begin to describe the bright, radiant personality she possessed. Meika was an angel in human form. She was beautiful, vibrant, and she loved to sing, to dance, and to ride her skateboard down the sidewalk. She was a remarkably resilient, cheerful child who could find joy whether it was pouring rain or shining bright outside. One of little Meika's most endearing hobbies was collecting ladybugs. She would catch them in the yard, keep them in a small glass jar for a few days to watch them, and then carefully release them back into the wild. When adults asked her why she let them go, Meika would reply that the ladybugs probably miss their moms and their families too. That small, tender detail tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the boundless empathy and understanding inside this little girl's heart. However, Meika's family life was incredibly complicated and unstable. Her biological parents, Spencer and Kayla, separated in 2009. A bitter custody battle ensued. Kayla eventually remarried a loving man named Brian Woodhouse, while Spencer moved in with his new girlfriend, a woman named Marie Magoon. Spencer and Marie lived a highly chaotic lifestyle. At one point, they even had to stay at a local emergency family shelter known as Inn from the Cold before eventually moving into a residence in the Temple neighborhood of Calgary. Despite this instability, a judge eventually awarded primary custody to Spencer, allowing Kayla to see her children only on the first, second, and third weekends of each month. While Meika flourished in her mother's home, things were drastically, terrifyingly different at her father's house. Just weeks before Meika passed away, her mother and stepfather noticed something alarming. Meika returned from her father's house with severe cuts and bruising on her body, which the little girl nervously claimed were from a car accident. Kayla immediately contacted Child and Family Services to report the injuries. It should have been a massive alarm bell for the authorities. But, tragically, the system failed, and no one intervened to stop the nightmare unfolding behind Spencer and Marie's closed doors. Marie Magoon had no children of her own, and possessed zero patience for someone else's child. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, Spencer and Marie had completely isolated the 6-year-old, pulling her out of school for an entire month. The final agonizing days of Meika's life began on Thursday, November 10th, 2011. That day, Meika suffered a horrific third-degree burn to the palm of her hand and her fingers. Instead of rushing this innocent crying child to a doctor, Spencer and Marie made a sinister choice. They decided to hide the injury to avoid facing Meika's mother. Late Friday night, Marie called a health hotline, casually lying to the operator. She claimed Meika had accidentally burned herself with a 400-degree hair straightener, but the truth was far more sinister. Marie had intentionally held Meika's hand over the open flame of a lighter. The health operator noted that third-degree burns turn white and should cause excruciating pain. Yet Marie coldly stated the child felt absolutely nothing at all. Because of their shared custody arrangement, Meika was supposed to return to the safety of her mother's house that Saturday. To cover up the severe burn, Spencer texted his ex-wife a fabricated story, begging to keep the children a few days longer. He claimed that Marie had left him and he was feeling lonely and didn't want to be by himself. Kayla agreed, entirely unaware that she was inadvertently sealing her daughter's tragic fate. Over that weekend, the abuse escalated into unimaginable systematic torture. By Friday evening, Meika was exhausted, traumatized, and weak. By Saturday, she was desperately hungry, begging for water, only to be met with more psychological and physical cruelty. Dr. Christopher Milroy, the medical examiner who later reviewed the case, would testify that the vast majority of her wounds were inflicted within the final 3 days of her life. He documented fingerprint-sized bruising on her cheeks, fingernail marks dug into her face, an adult-sized slap mark on her thigh, and evidence that she had been brutally punched directly in the mouth. She even had abrasions on her chest and back, consistent with being violently shoved into the carpet. Sunday, November 13th, became the final, most horrific day of her life. Spencer wanted to sit on the couch and watch a football game in peace, but Meika was whimpering from the extreme pain of her injuries. The 6-year-old kept promising she would try harder, pleading that she would be a good girl, but her abusers showed absolutely no mercy. As a twisted form of punishment, she was forced to run up and down the basement stairs endlessly. When her tiny, 46-pound body eventually gave out from sheer exhaustion, they dragged her up and down the steps by her hair and her ankles. They violently tripped her and slammed her head against the hard tile floor. If your heart is still breaking for this precious child, and you are still watching with us, drop a comment below telling us exactly where in the world you are tuning in from. Let us see the global army of our famous cold case family standing together. We read every single comment, and knowing you are here makes all the difficult research worth it. Medical examiners would later reveal the horrifying truth. Meika had been punched or kicked in the stomach with such extreme force that her pancreas and liver were completely torn. She also suffered at least 5 massive blunt force impacts to her head, causing catastrophic brain swelling. The most chilling detail provided by the medical examiner was the timeline. The fatal brain injury occurred between 2 to 8 hours before paramedics were ever called. Spencer and Marie sat in that house, watching a 6-year-old actively die, and did absolutely nothing. Only at 7:18 that evening, when Meika went into complete cardiac and respiratory arrest, did Marie finally dial 911. They put on a performance for the dispatcher, claiming the child had simply tripped and fallen down the stairs. At the hospital, doctors were horrified. One medical professional stated it was the worst collection of inflicted injuries they had ever seen in their entire career. Her mother, Kayla, rushed to the hospital to find her daughter clinically dead, kept alive by machines just long enough for the family to say their final goodbyes. After 16 grueling hours of doctors fighting to save her life, on November 14th at 1:47 in the afternoon, little Meika was taken off life support and pronounced deceased. If this breaks your heart as much as it breaks ours, please take a moment right now to drop a comment below saying, "Rest in peace, Meika," to show your respect for this beautiful little girl. And while you are down there, please ensure you are subscribed to the channel so we can continue to shine a light on these tragic stories together. Your support truly matters. The police immediately launched an investigation, but Spencer and Marie stubbornly maintained their lies, insisting it was a tragic staircase accident. Without a confession, the investigation hit a massive brick wall. That was until Calgary police deployed a highly controversial, massive undercover sting known as a Mr. Big operation. This specific sting, officially dubbed Operation Safe and Sound in Heaven, or Operation SASH, was staggering in its scale. It involved 158 police officers, the interception of over 17,000 private communications, and spanned an incredible 106 separate undercover scenarios from February to October of 2012. At the time the sting began, Spencer and Marie were completely broke and living out of their vehicle. Undercover agents approached them, posing as members of a powerful elite criminal organization, and slowly gained the couple's absolute trust by offering them friendship and money. The operation culminated in a meeting on a boat in a Vancouver marina with the fictional head of the crime syndicate, Mr. Big. The crime boss told Spencer that he knew about the police investigation into his daughter's death, but promised he could make the murder charges disappear forever, if, and only if, they told him the absolute truth about what happened, so he could clean up the evidence. Believing they were speaking to their savior, both Spencer and Marie finally confessed. In a 4-hour covert audio recording, Spencer admitted to punching his daughter in the stomach and pushing her so hard her head cracked against the floor. Marie admitted to holding the child's hand over the lighter flame and shaking her violently on the kitchen floor. Armed with the horrifying tapes, police arrested the pair. In 2015, the trial began. The judge initially found them guilty of second-degree murder, sentencing them to life in prison with no chance of parole for 17 years. Meika's family was devastated. Stepfather Brian Woodhouse addressed the media, stating that second-degree murder was not what they wanted, but adding, "Guilty is guilty, and you are both child murderers. They lose a few years of their life. We lost her." But the Crown prosecutors refused to accept that verdict. They appealed the decision, arguing that the couple's actions met the criteria for a much harsher penalty. In December 2016, the Alberta Court of Appeal made a rare and historic move. They upgraded the convictions to first-degree murder. The defense immediately escalated the case to the Supreme Court of Canada. In 2017, the highest court in the country heard the case. It took the Supreme Court justices just minutes of deliberation to return with an oral judgment upholding the first-degree murder convictions. In their written reasons, released the following year, Justices Abella and Moldaver established a powerful legal precedent. They ruled that forcing a child to relentlessly run the stairs and restricting her movements through violence and intimidation constituted unlawful confinement. Because the murder happened during an unlawful confinement, it automatically became first-degree murder. Spencer Jordan and Marie Magoon were permanently sentenced to life in prison, with absolutely no chance of parole for 25 years. Justice for the little girl who loved ladybugs was finally served. These terrifying cases break our hearts and permanently shatter our sense of safety and security. We can never bring Meika Jordan back, but we have a duty to ensure her name and her face are never, ever erased from history. Some stories have no ending, but their silence should haunt us. If you watch this and did not subscribe or share, ask yourself, who will speak for them tomorrow? Prove that you care. Hit subscribe, like this video, and share it to demand justice. Our famous cold case family needs you to be the voice they no longer have. See you in the next video.